Okay, we are up to video 5, I think, in our series about decimals. So in the previous video, we talked about adding and subtracting decimals, which was really super easy. Multiplying's not bad. Okay, so it's very similar to multiplying whole numbers. Okay, we just have this extra step of kind of figuring out what in the world do we do with our decimal point. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, multiplying decimals. So let's go back to fractions very briefly. We're always going to go back to something we know and see how that compares to what we're dealing with now, okay? Luckily, I'll show you like why this works, and then I'll just give you a set of steps on how to do it, and then we'll just practice. So consider 7/10 times 3/100, okay? So it seems like 7/10 and 3/100 keep coming up, okay? So if I were going to multiply these, what we have been told in the past with multiplying fractions is you look to see if anything will simplify. Are there any common factors top to bottom? In this case, no. 7 doesn't go into 10 or 100. 3 doesn't go into 10 or 100. So what we would be told is we would multiply across. Well, 7 times 3 is 21. And then 10 times 100 is 1,000. Okay? So now let's look at how that compares to decimals. Okay? So if I had 7/10, I've got that 1 0 in the power of 10. So that means I've got one decimal place. Well, I guess I should be consistent. So I'll put a little star here just so we don't get lost in the dot for the multiplication. Now for 3/100, I've got two decimal places. So that's going to equal 0.03. And then for the answer, I have 3 decimal places. So that's going to equal 0.021. Well, let's pay attention to a few things. We already know that 7 times 3 is 21. Okay. And then we have 1 decimal place. We have 2 decimal places. We have 3 decimal places. If I add up the decimal places in my factors, it has to equal the number of decimal places in my product. So 1 plus 2 is 3. So here's what we really do. We line up the numbers vertically. A lot of times when you do like basic arithmetic, add, subtract, multiply, divide, there is like a vertical setup. So we line the numbers up vertically, aligning them on the right-hand side. So aligning them on the right-hand side. All right, not by the decimal point. So you'll remember in adding and subtracting decimals, we lined up our numbers vertically by the decimal point. You do not do that here. You right-hand align the numbers, and I'll show you in a second what that's going to look like, okay? And then you multiply like always. So multiply as if the numbers were whole numbers. And then the only weird part is put the decimal in the answer. But where, we ask? So the sum of the decimal places in the factors will represent the number of decimal places in the product. So again, we had 1 decimal place plus 2 decimal places. Whoops, let me start that over. That was a disaster. Plus 2 decimal places. And that was our factor. So the first factor had 1 decimal place. The second factor had 2 decimal places, and the product ended up with 3 decimal places. Okay. So a lot of this is very similar to just multiplying whole numbers. We just have this added step of figuring out where on earth do we put the decimal point. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice. Let's say I have 2.9, and to that I want to multiply by 3.5. We'll start really, really easy. Okay, so 2.9 times 3.5. In this case, the decimals happen to line up, but they do not have to line up. Remember, we would right-hand align everything. I'll show you something like that where it would be necessary to not have the decimals lined up in the next example. All right. Now, you just multiply as if these were whole numbers. So we start with the 5. We're going to get our first partial product. We multiply the 9 and the 2 by 5. So 5 times 9 is 45. I keep a 5. I carry a 4. And then I take 5 times 2 and I get 10. And then I add the 4. That is my first partial product. Okay. So it's kind of like we're taking 2.9 and multiplying it by 5, and then we're going to add it to 2.9 multiplied by 30. Okay. So again, we're going to pretend now we're multiplying by 30. So we put the 0 and 30 here, and then I go ahead and I multiply by 3. Well, 3 times 9 is 27. So I keep a 7 and I carry a 2. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8. I've got my partial products, so I would add 5 plus 0 is 5. 7 plus 4 is 11, so I keep a 1, carry a 1. And then 8 plus 1 plus 1 is 10. Now, where do I put my decimal point? Okay, well, here I have 1 decimal place. Here I have 1 decimal place. 1 plus 1 is 2, so here I need 2 decimal places. So I would put my decimal between the 1 and the 0. And there you have it. That's multiplying decimals. Let's go ahead and look at another example. Let's say I have 8.3 times 6.24. Okay. So here's where you have to be careful with how you align your numbers. I look at the number that has the most digits in it, and I start with that one. So if I look at 8.3 and 6.24, 6.24 has more digits, so I start with that. And this is totally legal because multiplication is commutative, so you can multiply in any order. All right. I then take the second number, 8.3, and I'm going to make sure everything is right-hand aligned. That means the digits line up in a perfect straight line over on the right. Okay. So we've right-hand aligned, and now we start multiplying. So we're going to start by multiplying 6.24 by 1. So 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 6 is 6. That's our first partial product. Okay. So it's kind of like we're multiplying by 80 and then multiplying by 1. So now we're going to multiply by the 8. I put the 0 here. That kind of makes it like an 80. And then I multiply 8 and 4. I get 32. Keep a 2, carry a 3. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 3 is 19. So keep a 9, carry a 1. 8 times 6 is 48. 48 plus 1 is 49. I've got my 2 partial products. I add. 4 and 0 is 4. 2 and 2 is 4. 6 and 9 is 15. So keep a 5, carry a 1. 9 plus 1 is 10. Keep a 0, carry a 1. 1 times 4 is 5. Now I have 2 decimal places. I have 1 decimal place. All right. That means I need 3 decimal places in my answer. So I go back 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to put my decimal between the 50 and the 544. And that would be your final answer. Okay. Now, if you're struggling with how to multiply, you need to go way back into the beginning of my series of videos and find the one on multiplying whole numbers. Okay. Because at this point, I assume you remember how to multiply whole numbers. So when I talk about partial products and kind of like multiplying by the 30 and putting the 0 down as a placeholder, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, definitely go back and watch the first video on multiplying whole numbers from the series I did eons ago. Okay. Let's practice some more. Let's say we have 0.75 times 2.9. Okay, I went ahead and just started out vertically. All right, notice I did not line up the decimal points, but I did right hand align my numbers. Okay, so we're going to pretend these are not decimals anymore. Okay, we're just going to multiply as if they were whole numbers. All right, so 9 times 5 is 45. So I keep a 5, carry a 4. 9 times 7 is 63. 63 plus 4 is 67. I keep a 7, I carry a 6. Whoops. And then 9 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 6 is 6. Okay. Now we're treating this 2.9 like it's a whole number, 29. So we've multiplied by the 9. Next, we would kind of, in theory, want to multiply by 20. So I go ahead and I put the 0 and 20 here. And then I can multiply all of these numbers by 2. So 2 times 5 is 10. Keep a 0, carry a 1. 2 times 7 is 14. 14 plus 1 is 15. So I keep a 5, carry a 1. 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. I've got my partial products. I add 5 and 0 is 5. 7 and 0 is 7. 6 and 5 is 11. So I keep a 1. I carry a 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. And now I got to figure out how many decimal places. Well, I have 2 decimal places in my first factor, 1 decimal place in my second factor. That means I need a total of 3 decimal places in my product. So I put the decimal between 2 and 1, and there you have it. Okay. What if I had 1.325 times 12.7? Okay. Again, I've written this problem out vertically. I did not line up my decimal points. You don't line up your decimal points with multiplication. Remember, lining up decimal points when we were adding and subtracting was kind of the equivalent of finding an LCD. And remember, when you're multiplying fractions, you don't need an LCD. So we don't need the denominator, or we don't need the decimal points to line up. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and multiply as if we have 1,325 times 127. So we're going to start by multiplying everything by the 7. So 7 times 5 is 35. Keep a 5, carry a 3. 7 times 2 is 14. 14 plus 3 is 17. So keep a 7, carry a 1. 7 times 3 is 21. 21 plus 1 is 22. So keep a 2, carry a 2. And then finally, 7 times 1 is 7, plus 2 is 9. So I've done my first partial product. All right. So next up, we're going to still pretend that we're multiplying by 127. So we're going to multiply by the 20 in 127. So I add my 0 here in 20, and then I can just multiply everything by 2. So 2 times 5 is 10. I keep a 0. I carry a 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 1 is 2. All right. So now that's our second partial product. Now we're going to multiply by the 100. So I'm going to put my 2 zeros in 100. I'm going to have to move this line over a little bit because I didn't give myself enough room. Okay, so we're going to multiply now the 127 that we're pretending we have. We're going to multiply by the 100. So I put my 2 zeros and 100 down here. And then I multiply everything by 1. 1 times 1 is 5. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 1 is 1. I have my 3 partial products. So I add 5 plus 0 is 5. 7 plus 0 is 7. 5 plus 5 is 10, plus 2 is 12. So I keep a 2, I carry a 1. 1 plus 9 is 10. 10 plus 6 is 16. 16 plus 2 is 18. So I keep an 8, I carry a 1. 3 plus 2 plus 1 is 6. And there's nothing to add to this last one, so I drop it down. And now let's see how many decimal places I need. My first factor has 3 decimal places. My second factor has 1 decimal place. That means my product needs 4 decimal places. So I go back 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to put my decimal point between the 6 and the 8. All right. Let's try another one. What if I have 42.976, and I wanted to multiply that by 14.31. Okay, so we line everything up on the right hand side. Remember, you don't need your decimals to line up because you don't need an LCD. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to pretend these are whole numbers. So I'm really multiplying 42,976 by 1,431. So I'm going to start by multiplying by the 1. Well, 1 times 6 is 6. 1 times 7 is 7. 1 times 9 is 9. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 4 is 4. That is my first partial product. So if I go back to 1,431, I've already multiplied by the 1. Now I need to multiply by the 30, and I'm going to put the 0 in 30 here, and then I'll just multiply by 3. So 3 times 6 is 18. Keep an 8, carry a 1. 3 times 7 is 21. 21 plus 1 is 22. So keep a 2, carry a 2. 3 times 9 is 27. 27 plus 2 is 29. So keep a 9, carry a 2. 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. And then finally, 3 times 4 is 12. Okay, so that's my second partial product. All right, now I'm going to go to the 1,431. I've multiplied by the 1, the 30. Now I'm going to multiply by the 400. So I'm going to put 2 zeros down here for the 400. Then I can just multiply everything by 4. Well, 4 times 6 is 24. So I keep a 4, carry a 2. 4 times 7 is 28. 28 plus 2 is 30. So I keep a 0, carry a 3. 4 times 9 is 36. 36 plus 3 is 39. So I keep a 9, carry a 3. And let's see, 4 times 2 is 8. 8 plus 3 is 11. So I keep a 1, carry a 1. And then finally, I get 4 times 4 is 16. 16 plus 1 is 17. And again, I didn't give myself enough room. For shame. Okay, so that's my third partial product. I'm finally ready for my fourth partial product. So in 1,431, I have multiplied by the 1, the 30, the 400. Now I'm going to multiply by the 1,000. I'm going to put my 3 zeros and 1,000 down here. Then I can just multiply by the 1. 1 times 6 is 6. 1 times 7 is 7. 1 times 9 is 9. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 4 is 4. I've got all 4 partial products. I add 6 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 6. 7 plus 8 is 15. Plus 0 plus 0 is still 15. So I keep a 5. I carry a 1. 9 plus 1 is 10. 10 plus 2 is 12. 12 plus 4 is 16. Keep a 6, carry a 1. Let's see, 9 plus 2 is 11, plus 1 is 12. 12 plus 6 is 18. So keep an 8, carry a 1. Okay, let's see here. 9 plus 7 is 16. 16 plus 8 is 24. 24 plus 4 is 28. Plus 1 is 29. So keep a 9, carry a 2. 9 plus 1 is 10. Plus 2 is 12. Plus 2 more is 14. Carry a 1. 2 plus 7 is 9, plus 1 is 10, plus 1 more is 11. Keep a 1, carry a 1. 4 plus 1 is 5, plus 1 more is 6. Be very careful adding here. All those little pieces you carry, you got to keep them in line. Don't lose them. All right. So let's see how many decimal places we need. In my first factor, I had 3 decimal places. My second factor, I had 2 decimal places. 3 plus 2 is 5. That means I need 5 decimal places in my final product. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That tells me my final answer, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it because I'm kind of out of room, is 614.98656. And there you have it. So again, please, please, please go back and review multiplying whole numbers, because if you can't really multiply whole numbers, you certainly can't multiply decimals. Okay, so if you're in this video and you're like, whoa, what's going on? Go back, find the video on multiplying whole numbers, watch it, and then come back to this video. Okay, let's try multiplying by powers of 10. And we're specifically at this point going to look at multiplying by powers of 10 greater than 1, okay? So if you are multiplying a decimal by a power of 10, a special thing happens and there's actually no real work involved. So consider the following. Let's say I have 0.125, and I'm going to multiply it by 10, then 100. Then I'll go ahead and multiply it by 1,000, and then 10,000, and then maybe 100,000, and we'll stop there because you'll be able to easily see the pattern at that point. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and just tell you the answer. If I take 0.125 and I multiply it by 10, I get 1.25. If I multiply that by 100, I get 12.5. If I multiply by 1,000, I get 125. If I multiply by 10,000, I get 1,250. And finally, if I multiply by 100,000, I get 12,500. All right. So what do you think is happening? Okay. There's always a correlation when you have decimals and powers of 10. There's just things that happen. Okay. And notice here in the first example, I had 1 0 in my power of 10 and I moved my decimal once. In the second example, I had 2 zeros in my power of 10 and I moved my decimal twice. Next, I had 3 zeros in my power of 10. I moved my decimal 3 times. I had 4 zeros in my power of 10. I moved my decimal 3 times and I was at the end of the number. So I moved it 1 more and added a 0. And then finally, when I multiplied by 100,000, I had 5 zeros. I multiplied it 3 times. I was at the number. I added 2 more zeros so I could move my decimal 5 times. So here's what happens when you multiply by powers of 10. Now, this is specific for powers of 10 that are greater than 1. Move the decimal to the right 1 time for each 0 in the power of 10. So let's look at what that's going to be like. So what if I had 57.926 and I said, let's multiply it by 100? Okay. Well, how many zeros are in 100? 2. So that tells me to move my decimal 2 times to the right, and I get 5,792.6. What if I have 0.8763 and I want to multiply it by 10? Well, 1 0 and 10, move my decimal once, I would get 8.763. What if I have 4.00597 and I want to multiply it by 1,000,000? Okay, well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros in 1,000,000. So I need to move my decimal to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, well, 5 times, but I've got to move it 1 more time, filling in a 0. So my final answer would be 4005970. Fill in your commas, so it'd be 4,005,970. Okay. What if we had 62.05 and I said, let's multiply by 100? Okay. Well, 2 zeros in 100, move my decimal 2 times, I would get 6205. So I would get 6,205. What if I had 27.95 and I was like, okay, let's multiply it by 10,000. Okay. Well, 10,000 has 1, 2, 3, 4 decimals. So, or 4 zeros. So I need to move my decimal 4 times. So I move it once, twice. I'm at the end of the number, but I still have to move it 2 more times. I just fill in zeros. So I would get 279,500. So I would end up with 279,500. So multiplying by powers of 10, there's a huge shortcut. Don't have to really do a whole lot of work. Okay. What if we multiplied by powers of 10? That were less than 1. So just so you know what I'm talking about, that would be like 0.1, 0.01, 0.001, 0.0001, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So when you're talking about powers of 10 less than 1, they are decimals. So like I said, 0.1, 0.01, and so forth. So let's see what happens. Let's say I have 7,924 and I multiply it by 0.1. And then I multiply it by 0.01. And then I multiply it by 0.001. And then 0.0001. And then 0.00001. I think you'll see the pattern pretty quickly here. So if I multiply by 0.1, I get 792.4. 0.0, I get 79.24. 0.001, I get 7.924. 0.0001, I get 0.7924. 0.00001, I think I said that right, I get 0.07924. So what do we think is happening here? Well, in this case, we can see pretty clearly that our decimal is now moving to the left, but how many times are we moving it? Well, it all comes down to the number of decimal places. 1 decimal place, I move my decimal once to the left. 2 decimal places, I move my decimal twice to the left. 3 decimal places, I move my decimal 3 times to the left. 4 decimal places, I move my decimal 4 times to the left. 5 decimal places, I move my decimal 1, 2, 3, 4 times. I'm at the beginning of the number, I move it 1 more time and fill in a 0. So here's what you do. Move the decimal to the left 1 time for each decimal place in the power of 10. So if we go back 2 slides right here, we move the decimal 1 time for each 0 in the power of 10. But now when you're dealing with powers of 10 that are less than 1, you move the decimal to the left instead of to the right, and you move it for each decimal place instead of for each 0. Okay? So let's see what that's going to look like. Let's say I have 15,261 and I want to multiply by 0.001, which is 1,000 really. So when I do this, I've got 1, 2, 3 decimal places. So I move my decimal back 1, 2, 3 times. I would get 15.261. What if I have 745.9 times 0.01? Okay. Well, I've got 2 decimal places, so I need to move my decimal back twice. Now notice we didn't start with a whole number this time, so you're not just starting at the end of the number like right here and then going back. Okay, you're starting at the decimal point and then going back. So I'm going to go 1, 2 places to the left, so I would get 7.459. What if I had let's say 5.76 times 0.1? Well, same thing, I've got 1 decimal place. Starting at the decimal, I move it to the left once, so I get 0.576. What if I had 0.25 and I said we're going to multiply it by 0.0001? Well, I've got 4 decimal places in that power of 10, so I'm going to move my decimal back 1, 2, 3, 4 times, fill in those zeros, and our final answer is going to be 0.000025. And that's it. All right. So quick recap of this video. If we go back to what we know, multiplying fractions, we can see how that's going to relate to multiplying decimals, especially when it comes to where in the world you put your decimal point. So multiplying decimals, you multiply them just like you would whole numbers. You just have that extra step of figuring out where do I put my decimal point. So basically line everything up on the right-hand side, multiply as if you had whole numbers, and then look at your factors, the numbers that are being multiplied. Count up the total number of decimal places in your factors, and that's going to tell you the number of decimal places in your answer. So we practiced, we looked at multiplying by powers of 10 greater than 1. You simply move your decimal to the right for each 0 in your power of 10. We practiced, and then we looked at multiplying by powers of 10 less than 1. Little different, you move your decimal to the left, not the right. And you do this 1 time for every decimal place in your power of 10. This is really equivalent to dividing by powers of 10 greater than 1. And let me show you kind of what I mean by that. So if I have 56.5 and I want to multiply it by 0.1, well, let's convert that to a fraction, okay? So we already know that converting decimals to fractions is pretty easy. This is 560 or 56.5. And then the 0.1 is really 1/10. All right, I've got one decimal place. So that means my denominator is going to be 10. My numerator is just the decimal. So I've got 56.5 times 1/10, but let's look at what that really looks like. That looks like 56.5 divided by 10. So when you're multiplying by these powers of 10 that are less than 1, it really is identical to just dividing by powers of 10 greater than 1. And in the next video, when we talk about dividing decimals, we can look at that a little deeper. Okay. So again, if you're in this video and you're like, what is she doing? Go back. Okay, this is like way, way, way back to when I was talking about whole numbers. Find the video on multiplying whole numbers, practice multiplying whole numbers, and then come back to this video, okay? Because you have to be solid on multiplying whole numbers in order to multiply decimals, okay? Because remember, multiplying decimals is just like multiplying whole numbers with the tiny extra layer of figuring out where your decimal point goes, all right? So that's it for this video. Again, multiplying decimals, multiplying by powers of 10 greater than 1, and multiplying by powers of 10 less than 1. In the next video, we're going to tackle dividing decimals. All right, best of luck.